Different learners have different learning styles. It is absolutely vital as teachers that we are aware of these different styles and tailor our lessons to accommodate all learners. What are the different learning styles? Visual. Visual students are basically learners who learn through seeing. Visual learners need unadulterated views of teachers and materials. Visual students respond to teachers' body language. They also respond to teachers' facial expressions. They are very tuned in to non-verbal clues. Visual students tend to think in pictures. Therefore, it's absolutely vital that you use diagrams, graphs, pictures, illustrations. I'm very lucky in my discipline, film. There's ample opportunity to use video clips, and entire movies. Visual students require handouts. They're not good at taking in information just auditorily. They also need to take notes. This is how the information is anchored. Auditory students are students that learn through hearing, learning through listening. Auditory students respond extraordinarily well to lectures, to discussions, to talking through lessons and explanations. Just as the visual students are highly sensitive to teachers' body language and to teachers' facial expressions, auditory students are very sensitive to tone of voice, to pitch, to register, even to things like accents and underlying attitude. With auditory students, you cannot rely on the written word. They need to hear it. Tactile, kinesthetic students are learners who learn through movement, who learn through action, who learn through touching. With kinesthetic students, you need to take a hands-on approach, as they require a hands-on approach to learning. Kinesthetic students need to move, they need to explore topics physically. Kinesthetic students are not good at sitting still. They're not good at sitting listening to a lecture, not good at sitting down and just reading. They need physical stimulation. Again, in my practice, film is somewhat easy because we have a lot of opportunity for practical demonstrations, using cameras, acting, directing movies. In fact, as often as possible, I utilize lighting equipment and cameras and tripods within the lesson. I bring up students in turn to practice with the cameras, to demonstrate to the other students how, say for example, tilts or pans work, or indeed how to work with a handheld camera. As teachers, we need to develop different strategies to accommodate these different learning styles. For example, with visual students, using visual materials such as pictures, charts, maps, graphs, etc. Or again, in my case, videos. It's absolutely key that the teachers stand in full view of all students. Students cannot hide behind each other. They cannot be caught behind each other's heads. This is why I mentioned earlier that forming a horseshoe out of the desk is actually an optimal way of being seen by all of your students. Using color to highlight different points in the text is also very good for visual students. Make sure that your students take notes. And an easy way is to facilitate their note-taking by providing handouts with space for note-taking on it. Also, with your handouts, make sure that they're full of diagrams and illustrations. Visual learners also respond very well to multimedia. Film clips, smart boards, for example, even the resource of YouTube. For auditory students, you need to periodically instigate in-class discussions and debates. Ensure that all students have the opportunity to make presentations, which allows students the ability or the opportunity to present their work verbally. Teachers can also tape record their lessons and make those audio tapes available to students after class. It's very important at all times, but especially with auditory students, to maintain order, to make sure that only one student is speaking at a time. Because the human ear can only distinguish one voice at a time. You don't want dissonance, you don't want a wall of sound distracting, indeed preventing an auditory student from learning. Always ensure that you read all texts aloud with the class. This would include assignment briefs, handouts, or any textual material. Strategies to assist the kinesthetic student could include taking frequent study breaks. Try to include activities that involve movement, that involve group work. When talking about camera angles, for example, I always have students come up and demonstrate the angles that I'm talking about. I have the students set up tripods. I have the students set up lighting. In that sense, there's a lot of group work, and the students are always constantly moving. Allow free movement in the room. This is actually vital for my discipline. When you're teaching lighting, cinematography, or any camera work, using a dolly, using a crane, using a jib arm, you need that freedom of movement. It's always a good idea to vary the seating arrangement. This gives novelty in the environment for the kinesthetic learner. As with visual students, it's a good idea to vary color in your handouts and in any textual material. It's also a very good idea to keep your room well lit and to keep it visually interesting. You could do this with posters, you can do this with a lot of use of the smartboard, you can use this with props. It's always a good idea to have a very lively classroom that will keep the kinesthetic learner from getting bored.